The one starting place
is, wait for it, drum roll.
Drum roll. For longevity, the one starting place is?
Eat less often. Those 3 words. Eat less often. That is the one thing that will have the biggest impact on your longevity based on all the science we'll talk about today.
Okay. And this doesn't mean eat fewer calories necessarily. It can, and that's good.
Yes.
That's good. But a lot of people struggle to do that, to eat fewer calories.
Well, it comes naturally. If you're down to 1 meal a day, which I am now, you shed weight and then you get your 20-year-old body back. That's a nice bonus. But then you maintain that weight. You have a larger dinner, which is what I do to make sure I'm not becoming malnourished. Clearly, we're not talking about malnutrition or starvation here. It's about packing your calories into a shorter period of time.
That's because packing your meals into a shorter period almost inevitably means less calories, but that's not really what's happening here, right? It's not just about less calories. It's about what eating less often does inside of our bodies.
Right, and we'll get to that. But really, it's not just about the period of eating. It's the period of not eating that's so important for boosting the body's defenses against aging to maximize longevity. And we'll talk about how that actually works in a minute. But you can still have a large body and fast and get the benefits. In my lab, we've looked at mice that are obese and tricked them into thinking that they're fasted, and they live just as long as a skinny mouse. So really, it's about getting your body into this state of defense at any weight. Though I would say that there are certain optimal body weights that it's clear that if you're carrying excess weight, you're going to accelerate your aging clock.
What we don't want people to do is get the idea, though, that, oh, good, this works even if you're overweight, and so I can stay overweight, and then as long as I fast a little, it's going to be fine. That's not what you're saying also.
Right. There are certain body weights, waist to height ratios that are optimal for humans is about 0.5. But yeah, losing weight is helpful. We're not fat shaming anybody, but we're going through the science. This podcast is about what the science says, not what's socially acceptable. And it is true that if you're leaner, you will live longer. That is a fact. It's not necessary to get benefits by doing what we're going to say. But also, interestingly, as a side effect of eating less often, you will lose weight. I did. I've shed about 15 pounds since the beginning of the pandemic. And I look better. I feel better. And it's a nice side effect. But ultimately, what we're going to do here is we're going to say, these are the kind of things you should consider in your lifestyle. We're going to help you get there. We're going to ease you into it. There are some tricks that make it easier. And ultimately, you're going to end up with a lifestyle and hopefully a body that allows you to live decades longer. But let's go through the diets. Okay, so there's a fasting mimicking diet. Volta Longo, a colleague of mine from UCLA, is a proponent of that. That's a diet that lowers mTOR activity. It's low in these branched-chain amino acids that I've mentioned.
Okay, and is that a diet that mimics fasting, or does that include periods of actually not taking in any calories?
It's both, but you don't have to be as rigorous about the period. The food itself will mimic it.
So the food itself is being processed by your body in such a way that the body is like, I could really use a little bit more. I could really like a little bit more.
Yeah, you want the body to be in a state of perceived adversity. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, I'm running out of food. I'm not eating meat anymore because plants have less of these amino acids. So it responds to that low amino acid input. Volta's done some great work. Over the last few years, he and his group have shown that on this fasting mimicking diet, which they can send to your home, that actually helps cancer patients survive and get over chemotherapy quicker. Again, more evidence that fasting is good, not just for longevity, but for diseases. So that's one. The next one, let's talk about, which a lot of people call intermittent fasting. We'll just call it fasting. This is a period if you go longer than a day. Some people do 3 days. Some people go for a week. I wouldn't go longer than that because then you'll start chewing up your muscle, which you don't want to do. But these long extended periods are doing a real deep cleanse on the body and turning on that autophagy, that process of recycling proteins very deeply, especially once you get beyond the 3-day mark when your metabolism switches into what's called chaperone-mediated autophagy, the deep cleanse. So that's fasting. And then there's time-restricted feeding, which is what I do because I'm not very good at going beyond 24 hours.
Well, I think most people would really, really struggle to get there.
Yeah, time restricted feeding, which is what I do, which is try not to eat till dinner. That's hard enough. My hat's off to people like Peter Attia, the doctor and podcaster who many of our audience will have heard of. He can go for a week, and he's got a lot of willpower. If you've ever met the guy, he's different than me. I'm more of a hedonist, but
Is he grumpier at the end of the week, do you think, than he is at the beginning of the week, though? I mean, like after all of that time?
he's always serious. That's what I can tell you. But brilliant. But let's get back to this time restricted feeding. You want to have at least 16 hours of not eating or not eating very much. And then you can have 8 hours. So typically that means having a late lunch if you skip breakfast, or if you prefer to skip dinner, skip that.
Because what we got to remember here is that there's a period of sleep in which you are not eating. And
That's
so
the easy part.
What
Yeah.
you're really doing is tacking on hours to the front of that and tacking on hours to the back of that.
That's right. So when people say I'm skipping lunch, that's not as helpful. And so what I've done in my life, let's just use me as an example of an average human being, because I'm pretty lazy and I'm not that driven. I prefer to take a pill, which is not the right thing. What I started out in my life was not to eat breakfast, and I've pretty much been doing that since I was a teenager. And that for me works because I'm not really hungry in the morning. I have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and I still do that. A little bit of yogurt to mix my supplements with to dissolve them, but that's
and
it.
you're not doing the yogurt. And I've actually seen you do this. That like the amount of yogurt that you put into your little bowl is really minimal. It's basically just to mix up
Couple
your
of spoons.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's burnt off in 15 minutes. That's not going to be a big deal for the rest of the day. And I try not to eat at all until dinner. And then I have a really enjoyable, largish dinner. But it's certain type of food. We'll talk about the types of food later. But that gives my body this long window, more than 20 hours of not having glucose circulating from the external world. Now, what happens when you do that, and it takes a few weeks for your body to adapt, is that your liver will learn how to compensate for lack of food. It's called gluconeogenesis, the generation of glucose from your liver, and it actually overcomes the feeling of hunger. When you first skip breakfast and lunch, you're going to be hungry. You're going to be nervous. You're going to say, I can't do this. Sinclair is an idiot.
Well, this is why people fail at this, is because they run into that and they think, this is how life is going to be for the rest of the time that I'm on this diet. I can't do this diet.
Right. But do it for at least 2 weeks, because after the 2 week, especially by the 3 week mark, your liver has now learned that you're not going to have breakfast or lunch, and it will start making glucose at a steady level. That's really important because it's known that if you have these spikes of glucose, it leads to hunger when it crashes after a big meal, but also that when you get hungry, you eat. So you're in this wave of hunger, eating, wave of hunger and eating.
Do you think people should ramp up? I mean, you just said like do no breakfast and lunch for 2 weeks, but should they ramp up by like breakfast first and let their liver get used to compensating for no breakfast and then add lunch?
Well, I would skip one meal and then go for two.
Yeah.
You can't do the whole thing. Most people will fail. But you're trying to avoid this thing I was just talking about called reactive hypoglycemia, is that if you eat a piece of toast for breakfast or heaven forbid, a giant glass of orange juice, you'll have this spike in sugar and you'll feel great. But then your body will put out too much insulin and suck that glucose out of your bloodstream and put you into a glucose deficit. And that's hypoglycemia. And then you're hungry. You've got ghrelin coming out into your body and you feel hungry and you need to eat something. I'm at a state, though, now where I don't get those rises and crashes. My liver is putting out glucose from when I wake up till dinner. And I've never been so focused. I've never been so brain fog free, because these crashes, what they do is they make you feel shaky or tired and brain fog. And I wish I'd done this in my 20s and done it my whole life, because I've really never felt better because of it.